everybody, today we are making lemonade when life has given me, a very small lemon. This week we are fortunate enough to have both the first and the last of the Audi R8. We have the original Top Gear featured Daytona Grey V8 R8 from way back in 2007, and this, the R8 GT, that was effectively the swan song for the model and came out a couple of years ago. Now the idea was we were going to do a couple of videos bookending the R8 story, and then just before we began filming, the latest copy of Autocar landed on my doorstep, and on the front they said, "Oh, could this be the new Audi R8?" Which means that we can't really do an R8 summary anymore if there's going to be a new one. Instead, today, we, as R8 owner and R8 enthusiast, are going to be talking about what we'd like from the third generation R8 if Audi are brave enough to make it. Because I happen to believe that what they have right now is a near unique opportunity to create something truly special.
And if you're wondering why James did the GT, it's because, well, even Audi said in their original pamphlet on this particular car that it carries the badging to pay homage to the original GT. In fact, this car is called the Audi R8 V10 GT RWD, hence the quote-unquote GT. But we've made a whole video on that. In fact, we've both made two separate videos on that, one on this channel, one over on Sports and Touring. But today, I think it is really about getting into, well, if this isn't the last R8, what's the next one going to be like? And given that Audi has always shared the R8 platform with its Lamborghini equivalent, whether that was the Gallardo in the first gen or the Huracan in the second gen, inevitably the next one is likely to be based on the Temerario.
Because it's already there, and, well, like you say, this is how it's always been thus far. And the Temerario looks like a pretty exciting thing. I've not actually seen one in the flesh, but you have.
I have indeed, yeah. I got to go to a dealer launch, and honestly, it is a pretty cool looking car. I don't think it maintains a lot of the, I don't know, what do you call it? The
je ne sais quoi.
Yeah, the Lamborghini DNA specifically, and it's less of a wedge and
it doesn't have that continuous line.
No, it's kind of, the bonnet just kind of goes forward a little bit. But that is for a very good reason, and that's to increase its practicality. Maybe they did that because they thought, well, they're not going to make an R8 anymore, so we're going to need to make this one practical. But
the R8 hasn't been practical either because it's still got the same pathetic boot in it.
This is true. But the Temerario has a very interesting platform as well. It's got the V8 twin turbo hybrid system, producing
920 PS with 3 electric motors.
Yeah, I think 2 at the front and 1 that's sandwiched between the
motor and gearbox.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And I believe it provides reverse.
Yes, Ferrari have also done that in a few of their cars as well. It's a very clever solution actually to the problem.
It is, until you run out of battery, which for Artura owners, that was the first car that really announced that they were going to take that approach with an axial flux motor that's kind of like a pancake that sits between the transmission and the motor. They do run out of battery, and I spoke to an owner recently who said it's actually happened to him.
Well, he couldn't reverse it?
No.
No, really?
Yeah.
Oh my, what? Because I figured, well, surely, okay, yeah, I know technically if it runs out of battery, you can't reverse it, but also the engine can charge the battery, which will then let you reverse. Oh my word.
If it bottoms out on the battery, it takes about 2 or 3 minutes of the engine running, which if you're trying to park in a car park, can be a little bit of a problem.
Can you imagine? That's going to make someone very popular in London at rush hour, isn't it?
Oh yeah. I'm just going to have to charge my battery for a few minutes. Hold on a second.
R8.
Yes.
So, it's going to have, or something very close to the chassis of Temerario.
Yep.
But I think there is a very interesting opportunity here because a few things have happened since this car was introduced, which was in, 2015, 2016?
Thereabouts.
So this itself is a fairly old car. It's only just been retired, but is near 10 years old, as evidenced by the fact that nobody now can fit their phone in the wireless charging slot down there because phones have outgrown it. And this was always a little bit of an anachronism, this car, because, okay, maybe when it came out, turbocharging for supercars wasn't the norm, but by the time it ended production, I think this was basically the only naturally aspirated supercar still left, with the exception, of course, of the Huracan. That V8 twin turbo triple electric motor setup, that's mad. That's so over the top. But Temerario prices start at £260,000. If you want the lightweight package, it's nearer to £300,000. I've spoken to a few people that have gone to option these cars, and they're coming in at between £350,000 and £400,000. So that's a lot of money. But what it's done is it's given, I think, this potential third generation R8 a bit of breathing room, because before, let's just say an R8 at £200,000, which is more or less what this was, that's very, very top of the market.
Yeah.
Only a few years ago, all right, during COVID times when everything was strange, I heard rumours of brand new rear wheel drives selling for £95,000.
And at the time they were retailing it around 117.
Yeah, it was about the 120 mark. And then towards the end of the car's life, they did bump it up a little bit, and then your entry price went up to, I think, about £140,000 to £150,000. I remember being shocked. The last Spider that I had on loan, the Vegas yellow one, which was a great car, that was about £30,000 more than I remember it being. So everything has gone up. But that also includes the likes of your 911.
Yep.
Today, a nicely specified GTS is about 170,000 quid. Heck, a base model 911 Carrera 2 with no options at all is, I think, basically a packet of scratchings shy of £100,000. And this, I think, is one area where actually Audi should be looking at the influence and the genius of the original V8 R8.
Yep.
Because we all knew that that was a car based on the Lamborghini Gallardo platform, but let's be honest here, in terms of sales, specifically for a supercar, saying your car is basically a Lamborghini underneath is not exactly going to turn buyers away, is it?
No.
But what they did to differentiate it was give it that V8 engine, which is actually an absolutely stonking motor.
Yeah.
Having had now some time to sample once again that original car, it's actually the engine that I'm really falling for. Where for a lot of people, they're like, yeah, the engine's pretty good and everything, but I really want the V10. I don't know. I'd be keen to see your thoughts a little bit later when we drive the V8 for another video, how you feel it's aged, because I think it's done really well. But that car, if you remember, in the early 2000s, if you wanted a two-seater sports car with a premium badge on it, you only really had one choice, which was the 911, which, okay, is a 2+2, but for most people, the back seats are not used. If you wanted something a little more practical, of course, you could get an M3, RS4, C63, but those are not sports cars. They're sporty saloons. The Cayman only came into existence around 2005, and that was also aimed at quite a different part of the marketplace, because that was, I think, potentially even a sub £50,000 car. But the R8 came out alongside the Aston Martin V8 Vantage, the first one with the 4.3, and all of a sudden, people that maybe up until that point had been buying 911s for years had some really cool alternatives. And the genius of the R8 was to give people effectively the sort of supercar experience, but for 911 money. Now, of course, logic dictates that the R8 can't be as fast, as expensive, or quote-unquote as good as the Lamborghini. No. But I think if Audi were to play their cards right, I think that this, maybe more than any other time in automotive recent history, could be a case of restriction breeding innovation. Because they've got to do two things. They've got to make sure the car isn't quite as quick as the Temerario and not quite as expensive as the Temerario. And of course, you can achieve those goals pretty much by the same method.
Yep.
Now, we spoke to your son Damani earlier, and he gave us a few different ideas for what they could do. And one of the ones that he said, which I think is actually a pretty obvious thing to look at, is what if they dropped in the RS4's engine? Yep. Turbo V6. Now, on the one hand, I think that engine would need some serious rework to make it worthy of being in an R8, because this is a model that's had a lineage of great high-revving, naturally aspirated engines. And the one in the RS4, it's just not got that zing that you want.
Yeah.
So they could rework that, they could do something. And, of course, today, Ferrari will sell you a V6 supercar, McLaren will sell you a V6 supercar. In fact, I think McLaren will be delighted to sell anybody an Artura. Please, someone buy one. And even Maserati have tried to sell V6 supercars to people, though you could argue to not much success. Now, I think if you were smart, you would maybe look at the fact that all of those cars have struggled, and you might draw the conclusion that perhaps your supercar buyer doesn't want a V6.
No.
Even when it's brilliant. We both drove the 296. I don't know about you, but I quite enjoyed that.
Oh, and the sound of that thing. I mean, people would say that it sounded like half a V12, but it really did. I mean,
it does.
It just sounds like a less loud, less high, slightly less high-pitched, but it's got that tone to it. You know, that sound that you just can't put your finger on. You can't put words to it. You just know what it sounds like when you hear it. And also, just the response of that engine combined with a hybrid system was mind-boggling. So something like that, I think, could very much work if they could get the sound right. Because that was one of the things that really attracted me to my R8, which was its sound. And somehow, Ferrari created a V6 that was turbocharged and was constrained by regulations, etc., but still managed to actually have a sound that you can really enjoy.
It's got character.
Character, that's the word. There you go. Thanks, my thesaurus.
That's all right. So, if we're going to say, right, your Audi R8, it's got to have a V8. Well, there are two obvious choices. Number one is you could take the 4-litre V8 that has been in just about everything of late, from the RS6 to the RSQ8 that we both recently drove, to the Porsche Panamera and Cayenne, and it's even in the Lamborghini Urus. Though, if I'm being entirely honest, I always thought it was a little bit disappointing that Lamborghini themselves didn't do more to that engine to make it more bespoke for that particular application. I do not think that engine is suitable for duty in a supercar. I just don't think it's got the right character. It's a bit too binary. It's very on-off in its delivery, and I think with a supercar you need that response, you need that interactivity. You want it to be an exciting engine. The other obvious thing, of course, is to just go and use the V8 that's already in the Temerario, because you know that it's going to fit, you know that it's there, and if they can build more of the things, then they're going to justify the expenditure which has gone into developing and designing the thing. But we then get back to the problem of, well, if you're just going to put the same engine in there, well, it's going to be just as fast and it's going to be just as expensive. So, there's one or two things you could do. Now, the first off, and maybe I think the boldest of all of them, would be ditch the hybrid system.
That's not going to work, and it's not going to work for a couple of reasons. Because one, then they're going to need a completely new gearbox, because the gearbox doesn't have reverse, and two, regulations, although they are going backwards and forwards and up and down in terms of what kinds of cars you're going to be allowed to sell in the future, one of the things that will reduce the risk of the lifespan of that car being shortened is by making sure that it has some sort of EV power within it, so it can, you know, be quieter and, of course, be more efficient. So I don't think that's going to work.
No.
Which really only leaves one other option.
Yeah, and further to what you've just said, Lamborghini, by virtue of being a small manufacturer, will have more options open to them in terms of powertrain than Audi as a, you know, massive car company. That second option then, lose the turbos.
Yep.
And that, I think, would be really exciting, because, okay, you're going to lose, no doubt, quite a lot of power. But even if you also dialed down or perhaps simplified the hybrid system, you've still got to keep it all-wheel drive in some way, shape or form, because I think that's a key part of the Audi DNA.
Yeah.
But let's just say you lost 250 horsepower. You've still got a car that's got nearly 700 horsepower and would be capable of revving at least as high as the Temerario. You dial up the compression ratio, you make it an exciting, sporty thing. That would be a hell of an engine, and it'll sound better.
And with a naturally aspirated engine that doesn't have turbos getting in the way of some of that sound escaping from it, they'll be able to take full advantage of the 10,000 RPM red line on the Temerario. And the representative from Lamborghini, who was at this event, went through the reasons why they actually went for a 10,000 RPM limit. He explained that they actually start to lose a little bit of the torque above around 9,000 RPM, but they kept going for 10 for one reason, and I quote, the sound. And if you can imagine that in a naturally aspirated engine, you'd have an entry-level supercar with a sensible amount of power, 650 to 700 horsepower. You could price it lower, but the sound would be the thing that would make people want it. And as we have spoken about many times before, engagement is the thing that we buy these cars for, not for horsepower numbers. I mean, some people do. Some people want to go to the pub, brag to their mates that, oh, I've got 900 horsepower, oh, I've got 950, oh, I've got 1,000. You know, yeah, all the horsepower in the world that you'll never be able to put down on the road. I want that beautiful high-pitched sound that you can get from these engines.
Yeah. Gordon Murray has just proven that even at the stratospheric level of multi-million-pound cars, buyers are more interested in engagement, interactivity. He's numbers obsessed as well, but not in terms of 0 to 60 time or drag time or anything like that. Heck, even the McLaren F1, though it held the speed record for years and years, it was a happy accident.
Yep, and Gordon Murray, I have to say, this is one thing that I really appreciated about his initial interviews when he was launching that car, was he refused to talk about those things. It wasn't just that he wasn't going to market it on those things. He refused to talk about it. He talked about it only in terms of numbers that tell you more about the engagement of the car, about the gear changes, about the RPMs, about the number of cylinders, the configuration. You know, it was all of those things that were going to give you that sound, that touch, that feel.
Now, I don't know if you know this, but did you know that the T50 wasn't supposed to have a manual?
Really?
Yeah. Do you know what it was meant to have?
Single clutch.
Yep. He was going to put a sequential in it, or a single clutch.
Which is the halfway house between a DCT and a race sequential, as I explained in a previous video.
Because his idea was that modern buyers, particularly very high-end ones, well, they want the benefits of an automatic, but he wanted a bit of engagement and a bit of excitement, and the single clutch also is a lot lighter and more compact than a dual clutch setup, so he figured that would be the compromise. He made the assumption that the buyers wouldn't want a manual. Then apparently when he started talking to people that would have got one or would have been able to have afforded one, they all said to him, can you make a manual? And then he realized actually the appetite is there. Now, I don't think it would ever happen, but I would love for a new R8 to bring back the manual.
Never going to happen.
Never going to happen.
Emissions and performance figures.
Yeah.
This is just not going to happen.
But I think we do have this really golden opportunity at the moment for one major manufacturer out there to just acknowledge what all of us have been saying for a long, long time, which is that we're kind of sick of this supercar arms race. Like, we didn't really need 500 horsepower, but if you could be careful and, you know, be judicious with your use of the throttle and everything else, and where you were, you can use a 500 horsepower car and certainly not be terrified of it. But then cars got to 600 horsepower, and as soon as turbos got involved, well, it got outrageous pretty quickly. We've both driven the McLaren 720S. That's absolutely insane. Then you've got the likes of the 296, that's 830 horsepower. The Ferrari SF90, that's 1,000 horsepower. The Revuelto, that's 1,000 horsepower. These are crazy numbers. Even on a racetrack, you'll very rarely be able to use those. What I'm more interested in is being able to get to that 10,000 RPM limit, being able to hear the thing at full chat without being worried that I'm about to hit warp speed or go back to 1955. I think there is this opportunity for Audi to build something using this foundation of the Temerario, but take away some of that complexity, take away a little bit of that determination to be the fastest thing around, which I think also suits the whole Audi thing. What I would really love to see, if they could build it with a naturally aspirated version of that engine, is that I think this would really be a great way to respect the spirit of the original R8. Because though looking at it now, it seems like a pretty obvious thing for Audi to build, you know, naturally aspirated, high revving engine with the option of a manual gearbox. That was fairly normal for 2006, 2007. It wasn't normal for Audi.
No.
And if you knew your hot Audis, well, the R8 was a real departure, not just for the fact that they hadn't made a supercar before, but it wasn't really a very Audi way of building a supercar. Knowing that the R8 exists also made a lot more sense of the B7 RS4, which I've just acquired an example of, and hopefully soon you'll be able to get to drive. You see, before that, your hot Audis, your RS6s, the previous RS4, and before that, the RS2, they were typically turbocharged, and many of them, certainly like the RS6, they were also automatic. The B7 RS4 comes along, and there's this all new, developed out of their existing engine, high revving V8, which goes to 8,250 RPM, attached to only a manual gearbox. And everybody looked at it thinking, hang on a minute, what? Bear in mind, by the way, at this point in time, BMW's V8 M3 didn't exist. That had yet to come out. They just retired the E46. Mercedes, of course, had their C-Class equivalent, and that did have a V8, but this was something totally new. They also did little things, like in that they wanted it to drive a little bit less like you assumed an Audi would. So, okay, the engine's still all the way out the front, but they made the Quattro system more rear-biased. So they were doing lots and lots of things that then when the R8 comes out, you go, hang on a minute, this was a dry run for the R8, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You were getting used to building these sporty, rear-biased cars with sexy, naturally aspirated engines, manual gearboxes and all that sort of stuff. And the market has shown very, very clearly that it has an appetite for that kind of car. So I think if they could tap into the nostalgia for that kind of car, they've also got, of course, this amazing dealer network and a much better reputation for reliability than the likes of, say, McLaren do. I think there's a golden opportunity for them to come out with something that could not just sell well, but also do something that you and I have talked about a lot, and manufacturers seem to be ignoring, I think, to their downfall, and that's the halo effect.
The car that makes all your other cars even cooler, and the fact that you can even build a car and potentially even make a loss on it and make up for that with the profits you then make by selling even more of your other cars, your mass-produced cars. And it makes me sad to see that so few manufacturers are really going down that path now. And that's one of the things that made me sad when Audi said they weren't going to make the R8 anymore, because it made me feel like, well, you know, that was your halo car. And, well, you were one of the few manufacturers left that still had one.
Yeah, it also, apparently, one of the reasons it kept on for so long is that it was extremely popular for customers to take racing.
Yeah.
So many programs around the world, particularly in the likes of GT3, where the R8 was really successful.
Yep. And, you know, the old saying, race on Sunday, sell on Monday. And the fact that your Audi R8 is perhaps winning in Le Mans might not result in a whole load of R8 sales, but it certainly will increase the pride that people feel in the brand when they then go out and buy their RS4, their RS6, because they need a sensible daily with a big boot. But, you know, we just don't seem to have that anymore. And in fact, a lot of sort of racing today, like the British Touring Car Championships, is actually being sustained more by independent racing teams than it is by the manufacturers. Whereas in the old days, back in the 90s, I remember watching Mansell race the Ford Mondeo.
To varying degrees of success.
To varying degrees of success, but I didn't care because the car looked so cool, and I wanted one. And I actually did get one in the end.
And that is the thing, you know, the original R8, Iron Man had one of those, and the R8 made the entirety of Audi that much cooler. And I think it is very, very possible to conceive, and we've just driven past a Fiesta ST, that the presence of an R8 would sell an A1.
Yes.
In the same way that the Ford GT would sell a Focus RS, but if you couldn't afford a Focus RS, you maybe could have a Focus ST, and maybe if you couldn't afford that or you didn't want that, you could have a Fiesta ST, and if you maybe couldn't afford or you didn't want that, you'd
get
buy
the ST line.
Yeah, ST line, you know. everybody I know that drove a 1 litre EcoBoost, the old Eco Beast,
Yeah.
that was because they were saving up for an ST.
Yep.
It works. It does work. But I think too many accountants are sort of become somewhat myopic, and they go, well, how many R8s are we actually selling? And they go, oh, well, not enough. You go, yep, that's not really how it works.
No.
TT itself is also retired now, so hopefully you won't have people saying, oh, it's just a big TT, which it never was.
No.
And I mean, even, I know it sounds really, really silly, but having cars like this inspire people to then go on and work for car companies. You know, there are people that I know who work as salespeople or mechanics, or even work in the development side, you know, building the cars, that do so because when they were young, this company was building the coolest thing they'd ever seen, and they want to be a part of that story. And I think a company that's as big as Audi should do this. I really miss the days of VW Group in general being very proud of things like the Bugatti Veyron, which we all know lost extraordinary sums of cash. But also, nobody's going to forget the Veyron.
Nope. And nobody's going to forget that it was the VW Group that created it. That breaks my heart to see so many brands throwing away the opportunity to have a halo car and preserve enthusiasm in the brand through that particular platform. And I'm encouraged by the idea that Audi are thinking about bringing back the R8. So Audi, I really hope that you do take this opportunity to do something a little different and go back to the original spirit of the first ever R8, even the first gen V10 R8. Give us that naturally aspirated sound in the V8. Give us an entry-level supercar that the average person who is buying their first ever supercar can get into and drive and not be terrified of the fact that they have now got probably 4 times as much horsepower as they've ever had before. Double is more than enough.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, you know, a lot of people now have had a Golf R, and they're great, they're lovely, they're fantastic, but supercars are special.
They are, and it's not just about the power.
No,
it's about the sound and the engagement.
And if you want somebody else's opinion on that, well, we're very soon going to be filming a video with our good friend Will, co-host of the Radiator Arms podcast, where he's going to get his very first taste ever of a supercar behind the wheel of the original Top Gear R8 V8, which Ant and I are also about to hop in and do a little bit more filming ourselves. But for now, we simply wish to say a big thanks to all of you, and don't forget, hit that like button, comment down below, what would you like a 3rd generation R8 to be? And of course, if you haven't already, subscribe to, and we'll see you for the next one. Bye bye.